I'm gonna get rid of these shadows. They're killing me. I'm gone by next time. Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard. We're going to let some folks come in here and then get this started. Hopefully everybody's got their coffee, because we've got a lot of talking to do here. So it's going to be fun. All right, and I see more and more folks coming in. All right. Flying in here today. I actually left my coffee upstairs, but I made rocket fuel today, so I am ready to go. All right, we can get started as folks come in. This is our coffee talk, and it's the ins and outs of automation and smart bidding. And I am here with Menachem Ani, the founder of the JXT Group, and you might have seen him talk about Performance Max for lead gen yesterday. And I am Greg Finn, partner at Cypress North, and I am a contributor at Search Engine Land. And the purpose of these coffee talks isn't to have a panel or a traditional session. It's basically allow anyone to kind of ask us anything about the topic posted, or if you even want to veer off a little bit more, that's fine too. These are in Google Meet, and these are also recorded. So people will be able to see this on demand. So if you want to hold off on some of your company data or something like that, feel free to, because it is recorded. So it looks like everybody's here. Again, thanks for joining us. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the session so far. If you miss any of those sessions, you can access them on demand through the agenda. And again, I am Greg Finn, and we have Menachem Ani here. And we are going to start off. I'm just going to kick it to you, Menachem, because we're talking about automation and smart bidding. And I know you covered a bunch of that in the past. I wanted to know just overall kind of like what your current temperature is on maximizing conversions or maximizing conversion value. And you talked about it a little bit. You didn't get to go too far into it yesterday, but about how it spends through the budget and just what your take is currently on the state of max conversions and max conversion value. And if anybody wants to ask questions, you can either raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand button. It's the hand at the bottom that kind of looks like this, or you can just put it in the messages and I'll ask away. So why don't you take it away here, Menachem?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. Always great to chat with you. I think to answer your question, the way we look at it is ultimately you want to try to get on to maximize conversion value with target ROAS. It's not always possible because you might not have revenue data coming into Google Ads. In those cases, we do like max conversions with target CPA. But the tricky piece with that is the system doesn't really know the difference between the different conversions it's getting, what's good and what's bad. And that's kind of what I covered in my talk yesterday, is why target ROAS is important, because it can differentiate between different conversions and the values that you provide for each one.
Okay, and then I guess just to go one step further, you're still seeing maximized conversions and maximized conversions value work well with that? Do you have any tips specifically around those two different types of bidding?
Yeah, so again, if you don't have your revenue coming into Google Ads, then I kind of lean on max conversions with target CPA. Sometimes with smaller budgets, it's a little tricky. So you sort of have to train the system. We typically start out with max conversions, let the system gather data. I think it's important to just keep in mind sort of like when you select a bid strategy, like what the mandate is that you're giving Google. With max conversions, it's basically spend my whole budget and get me as many conversions as you can. And when you add the target CPA in there, that mandate changes. It becomes spend my whole budget if you can reach this target CPA, and it may not spend the full budget if it doesn't think it can hit the target. But without enough conversion data in the system, you might have trouble getting there. So it's a bit of a balance, but yeah, typically we'll start with max conversions and then add in the CPA target as we have conversion data in the system.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, I've not seen maximized conversions or maximized conversion value work at least in the past 3 months, as well as it has in the past. I don't know why. It is definitely spending through the budget, but for some
Yeah.
reason, I've just not seen it work as well as it has. I don't know if anybody else out there has
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah, I would say the same. And like typically we don't like to stay on either of those. We like to have a ROAS or a CPA target in there. It's more like just to get the system going.
Cool. All right. And Jared, you had raised your hand. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, we've actually been kind of testing bidding strategies. So in our account, we have about 3,000 campaigns for one company. We have a network of attorneys that we provide leads to, and we tested maximize conversions. We tested target ROAS, and then we tested target CPA. And we do have offline conversions. So whenever it is a good lead and we get paid for the lead, we get we directly get the scene. We look at ROAS, but ultimately from the smart bidding side, the target CPA is definitely won those bidding tests.
Yeah. And that's another thing too with target when you're maximizing conversions or conversion value, you want to keep that budget like constricted, because like Menachem said, it'll spend through it. So you shouldn't have the same budget as something like target CPA as you do for maximize conversions. That should be lower. You should make it work harder. Because again, maximize or target CPA is shooting to that target, or target ROAS is shooting to that target, and maximize is literally doing what it's saying it's doing. It's going to go spend. It can jack those CPCs up if it thinks it's going to get you one extra conversion. That is technically maximize conversion by having that one extra conversion out there. All right, and Menachem, I know you've got a little different take on sort of what we'll call seeding campaigns, right? So obviously the goal is to get to going towards a target, right? So that we're aiming towards something. When you start, what is your typical approach from the bidding strategy standpoint?
Sure. So sometimes we'll even start with manual bids or max clicks just to push a campaign. If it's, keyword research is done well and you know what traffic you're aiming for, but ultimately the goal for us is to get to target CPA or target ROAS. So for me, I look at the first few weeks of a campaign as more of like gathering data, kickstarting the system, let it go, and get to that place where it can run efficiently, because the algorithm will win if it's got the right inputs, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think almost when we are here talking about automation and smart bidding, at least from the bid strategy standpoint, it's sort of a different landscape than I think a lot of traditional paid search folks have operated in, where instead of going out there and, again, adjusting those bids, you can't, right? Like you can put in some of those different targets and things like that. But I like to think of it a lot like a teeter-totter, right? Where you've got sort of like volume on one side, and then you got like efficiency on the other side. And you're always trying to find like that fulcrum of the middle where you are getting efficiency, but you're also getting the right volume. And you don't want too much volume with bad efficiency, and you don't want all the efficiency in the world without volume. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, so we look at it pretty much the same way. Once you get to a good place and the system is running and driving quality conversions, it's really just tweaking your bid strategy, maybe loosening your bid slightly to get more volume, see what happens to your CPA, see what happens to your conversion quality. But definitely a lot of incremental changes. And I think at that stage, like you mentioned, it's more of like managing the budget with your CPA, making sure it doesn't overspend or bring too much traffic that's not converting well with your bid target.
Great. Okay. And Jason, we have a question from Jason here.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Yep. My question has to do with a branded campaign. We are one of those people that a lot of people will not take as a customer, because we are a very large company that is very specific on branding and all that kind of type of thing. So right now, I've got a mandate to run the majority of our budget towards branded campaigns. In the phrase match, our cost per clicks are ridiculous for a branded campaign. And the recommendation that I've received by others is to move it to a manual CPC, and then take the current CPC and drop it by 25%, and then watch impression share. Would you agree with that, or would you go at it a different direction?
Yeah, so that's a question we get a lot. I think branded campaigns are really the only ones where I don't like smart bidding, because if you think about it, your goal with a brand campaign is not to maximize conversions or hit certain CPA or ROAS targets. Your goal is to show up so your competitors don't. And so to that effect, we typically either use target impression share with a max CPC or manual bidding, and that works well coupled with phrase and exact match only. If you put broad match keywords in there, it can start to get a little wonky, especially if the brand name is a bit more generic. But that's typically the approach. And then, like you mentioned, watch the target impression share. And as long as you're capturing about 80-90% of your search impression share, I find that that's usually where performance will fall off. Like at that stage, you're capturing whoever you are meant to capture, and make sure they don't land on a competitor's site without overpaying for the clicks.
Yeah. And just to echo Menahem as well here, having those branded terms, it's a necessary evil at this point, right? And many folks remember when you couldn't appear on other people's brands. It was like you would have to pay such exorbitant prices, and Microsoft was the only one that you could really do it and make money on. But you sort of need it today, right?
Yeah.
And I think the key to what you said is having that max CPC if you do target impression share. If you don't do that, it will be a nightmare. I have some clients where I've got them on a very easy target ROAS to hit, and I just monitor our impression share on that too, and it does well. And then the only thing I would also say with that is maybe it's a really tricky category or something like that, but if you're spending all your money in those branded terms, you're not finding anybody else that's like sort of that scalable, unbranded traffic of people looking for a product or a service. They're looking for you, right? So like, again, that's why I call it that necessary evil, is that it is, you have to do it. Do you have other people, Jason, as well, that are like bidding on your name specifically and trying to take your business?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so again, you have to do that, but really trying to carve out and get creative with the non-branded stuff too is, I think, again, where you're seeing incrementality and getting new customers and all that. So I wouldn't just say like, hey, let's not do that at all and only do brand. I think in that case, it's a little bit of a vicious cycle of just you're not going to grow as much, obviously. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. Okay. We'll keep waiting for some other questions to come in, but in terms of automation, I wanted to just talk a little bit here about broad match. Menahem, your thoughts?
So there was a time a bunch of years ago where I wouldn't touch broad match. Like our Google reps would call us all the time, like, you have to try. And we'd be like, no, never. But you know, times change, and I think the technology has changed. The algorithm has gotten better at matching. We do use a lot of broad match now. Typically, I'm more comfortable using it when revenue is being piped back into Google Ads so that it knows what's converting and what isn't. But there are cases we'll use it in regular lead gen campaigns that are not tracking revenue. You just got to be a lot more on top of your search terms, you know, whatever search term data is available. But definitely a big fan, you know, once you tap out whatever's available, whatever search impression share is available on your keywords in your market, in phrase and exact, that's really the only way to continue to grow a campaign at a certain point. You know, aside from dynamic search, you know, is another thing. It's similar to broad match, but we rely on that as well.
We're going to get into that in a minute too. And I think one thing that's important to note with broad match is that it is obviously broadly matching, but it also takes previous search intent into play, which is like a key differentiator.
Right.
And to Menahem's point, like, we wrote a book here a while ago that's like already out of date, so don't try to buy it. And in the book, we said, like, do not ever use broad match. And now broad match is like the best working match type for many of our campaigns, also in lead gen as well. I saw Melissa in here, so that's a shout out to you. But it's one of those things where if you look at the search query report, you might throw up, right? Like it's pretty bad, and you look at it and say, oh my gosh, why is this matching here? But it is looking at what is on your landing page, what other keywords you have in your ad group there, and also what the user has searched for before, right?
Right.
So I think that's another thing too. Like, don't get too caught up in the search query report. Look at the final metrics and like try to judge it off those final metrics.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think that's also a good point as it relates to smart bidding. With manual bidding, you don't know any of that stuff. The system is able to see what that user previously searched for, and it looks at a lot more data signals. So just in general, the two tie together in that way.
Yeah, and then if using broad match, you should never be on any type of manual bidding. That is a recipe for disaster. You need to be on something like a target CPA, target return on ad spend, or something of that caliber. It has to be smart bidding of some type.
Right.
Okay, speaking of, again, match types here while we're on it, what are you seeing just across the board in matching, close variants? What are your thoughts here?
I mean, in general, like, you know, for smaller, newer campaigns, we typically do start with phrase and exact and then layer in broad match, you know, as we feel comfortable for it. It's sort of like that progression, similar to smart bidding. In general, I find that, yeah, there's junk that makes its way into the search query reports, but it does a really good job thematically of finding what makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely important to watch the search terms, but don't go too crazy with it.
Yeah, and then I guess just to touch on what Jason was saying before, if you're trying to do any type of brand protection, branded campaign, even some kind of like competitor conquesting, you should not be using broad match, right? That's going to just expand things way too much. You don't want to look at target impression share with broad match. Target impression share almost is a non-factor when looking at any type of broad match term, because there's so many different variants that are out there and so few even that you can see. So,
and it'll be interesting to watch how that shifts, because now Google mentioned that GML brand exclusions for branded campaigns. So like you can create a brand list of your competitors and exclude them from a branded campaign. I think that hasn't been rolled out yet, but it definitely sounds like another way of ensuring the traffic stays true to your brand.
Okay, cool. And we've got a note here from Trey, and Menachem, let's hear what you have to say about this. And Trey says, in terms of branded, the most efficient split I've tested is putting exact match brand terms in one campaign on eCPC and aiming for impression share, and then putting all other variations on another campaign on max conversions with a very high TROAS. I always operate on the thought that automation on branded isn't incremental, but I found that it is with this split.
So I think the tricky piece is you have to evaluate the trade-off of segmenting the campaigns and splitting the data across multiple campaigns, which in general is not as effective as it used to be. You know, but I do see that in some campaigns things work differently than other brands, and so, you know, there's no best practices in terms of you have to do it this way. I'd say test and whatever works best for you. But in general, we found that manual CPC and search impression share does accomplish the ultimate goal of making sure your competitors are not conquesting while keeping your costs down as much as possible. But I'm sure there are other setups that can work well like that to help you grab that extra incrementality. I just don't know if I love the complexity that it adds to the, you know, the campaign structure.
Hey, I'm a complex guy, so if it's working for you, I love it, Trey. And one other thing I'd say is if you have that TROAS, you said very high.
Yeah.
If you've got branded, I would just make sure it's still under, like your target is under what your actual returns are, because you don't want to try to push it too much because you're going to lose impression share. So let's say, you know, you're bringing in leads at, let's say $1,000 or $1,000, let's say. You would probably want your target to be like $800, $900, knowing that it's going to be able to get that. You wouldn't want to push it over that and say, let's go for, you know, or sorry, you want to over that. My apologies. You want to make it easy on it, right? So you don't want to say like, all right, we're bringing leads in at $1,000. Let's try to get them in at $500, because then you're going to lose that impression share. Okay, we've got a hand up here. Jason, we got another question from Jason.
Sorry, I thought I actually put it down and I just asked it in the chat. One quick thing I forgot to ask is on that manual CPC, would you use or not use the enhanced CPC?
So typically we just turn it on. I think enhanced CPC is just, it allows the system a drop more leeway. I believe it allows you to increase your bids by like 30%. I don't know if they changed that, but that's really what it does. If the system believes the user is more likely to convert, it allows itself to go a little further in the bidding, but we typically do turn that on.
Yeah, now is no restriction actually. So it can go as high as it wants, but on average, when you look at it out, it'll be roughly that CPC you put in there. But at the same time, if it thinks it's not going to convert, it could drop it. So I'm always eCPC, but if anybody has any other thoughts or things they've tested, feel free to speak up. Okay, so I've got, you bet. All right, another question from John here. Is there a better performing bid strategy that should be used for PMAX campaigns? How long do you test a bid strategy in a PMAX before changing it?
So with PMAX, you really only have the option to do max conversions, max conversion value, and then add a CPA or add a ROAS target. Typically, I like it to be on ROAS because it's very prone to generating spam if it doesn't know which conversions are better than the other. So I like to start with max conversions, especially for new accounts. If it's an existing account with a lot of conversion data, you can likely start straight with max conversion values or even a target ROAS. But definitely start from, like, to me, I look at it in stages. Like the first couple of weeks is get traffic, push the system, see what happens, and then you go after performance and efficiency. So we start with max clicks, max conversions, and then move towards target CPA or target ROAS. That's typically the model that we follow, but sometimes there's definitely nuance to that.
And a question on that follow-up. So you start with max conversions and then go to something like a target ROAS or target CPA. How long do you wait before you make that change?
So I like to give it a couple of weeks at least, but I think the question is really less about how long you wait and how much traffic is flowing through it. With smaller budgets, you probably have to wait a few weeks. With larger budgets, you might have data coming in within a few days to really push it a lot faster. The one thing we've learned about Performance Max, though, is never make like super drastic changes because it can throw the whole system off. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you have a target ROAS set and you change the target by 50%, 100%, or you change your budget, double it, triple it. That kind of thing can really throw the system off and take a bit of time to recover. So definitely would caution against that and try to do things incrementally, increase in changes of 10, 20% in that range.
Yeah, and I'm going to go contrarian to Menahem here.
Go for it.
I am just so fed up with max conversions and max conversion value in general. I've started doing everything with TROAS and TCPA to start. I do agree it should be 10% like changes, like small changes, but I've just seen much better campaign starting. I started one off 2 weeks ago, trying to hit 350% return. It was up to 1,200 the next week. So when it used to not start strong, I think you might see some success testing, just starting off the gate, especially if it's not a new campaign and there's data in there.
Yeah.
And just test and see what works for you.
Yeah, and we do similar for accounts that have data in it. Other campaigns running, the Pixel has some data, but when it's a brand new account, I guess, yeah, that's definitely something to try out.
Okay, we've got a question from the audience, Somali. Hopefully I got that right. If not, just correct me and ask away.
Hi, Samili. So it's a bit of a complex question. I'll see if I can explain. So I have an account, like in specific case that we have like some campaigns we use TROAS, it's lead gen. And then we've been testing then TROAS for about 6 months. But then what happened is, like, okay, campaigns, they perform well, they reach the target, or sometimes they even like get a return, but then we lost volume of leads. So you get like a higher, well, the leads are more valuable, but then we actually lose volume within these leads. And then we have what, the MQLs and the SQLs. And then eventually we lost volume, and then, okay, so we also didn't reach the minimum amount for SQLs to actually have a TROAS performing. So we decided to merge three different campaigns that target the same area within a portfolio bid strategy. That was like 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, something like that. And then, okay, so then what we see is now, because we have the campaigns differently, and then the major campaign, they still perform like quite stable. It's the same thing, didn't change much. But then the other smaller campaigns, they, like some of them, they perform well for the SQLs, but then others, they increase the cost, like the cost per acquisition actually went like 3-4 times higher than actually it used to be before. And then now we've been this portfolio bid 6 months with like for the leads, and it's like, okay, what's next? Like, what exactly, how to adjust to get a balanced performance with volume, with value as well? Or what exactly is your take on portfolio bid strategies with TROAS or maximize conversions, or anything you have on this similar?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. I think going back to what Greg was saying before about like that seesaw effect, if you find that volume is slowing down and it's not spending or performing the way you want, typically what we'll do is incrementally loosen the bid target. So if you have a target ROAS, let's say aiming for 100, just drop it 10%, so the system has a bit more leeway to push more aggressively and drive more traffic. Again, without making drastic changes, just slowly loosening it to push it in that direction, and then hopefully that'll help it start to pick up volume again, and you can ultimately go back to where you need it to be. But those are the kind of changes we'll make. If all else fails, I would remove the target ROAS and just max conversion values, kind of fall back to that just to kickstart it and let it run, and then re-add the target ROAS setting later.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, just in general, I'd be concerned about is you were saying that a lot of the sales qualified leads, or in lead gen, it's made it past the marketing ideal client profile and into the hands of sales, and that number dropped, but the overall customer acquisition cost and overall close deals one skyrocketed. So that almost makes me think there's something going on where maybe those all were not actually as qualified as you thought, because you typically don't see that almost isn't like a ad side of things. It's almost a sales process kind of problem in there, right? So I would look at that as well. But yeah, usually when it stops performing, we do like Menahem said, let's go towards more volume, less efficiency, 10%, or so, and try to get some of those numbers back up.
Yeah, and I think one last thing I would add to that is you can definitely reevaluate your audience signals and see if there's something fresh that you can add into it, just to give the system a bit of more nuance. Like, hey, these are also might be people that could perform in the campaign.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, there's so much now that you can observe and you don't have to target. Like, you might see something in there that is shocking, right? Like, if you toss all those audiences in, there's plenty of like in-market audiences targeted towards like lead gen out there too. So if you put those in and you observe those audiences, that might be something that you could then try to leverage down the road to get more efficient. Okay, another question here from Amy. Has anyone tried a campaign or experiment with only broad match keywords? Google's really pushing that in recommendations. And I'm going to go on a diatribe here for 1 minute first. If Google's recommending something to you, it is probably going to make your account worse, right? If you look at the Opta score, what it does is it will tank your entire performance of your account. There's an article out there somewhere where it was a pet crematorium, right? And one of their things was to put in like a sale, like a promotion extension to get to 100% Opta score. So if you see these recommendations, those recommendations really should be sent to the shareholders of whoever's holding Goog stock. So I wouldn't take the recommendations for much value. And honestly, you can have a terrible Opta score and have amazing performance. So I'm just got that out of the way. And Menahem, you can answer the question.
Thank you for that. I agree with you 100%. We don't look at the optimization score at all in terms of performance. I think that there definitely are places where broad match makes the most sense. And if you have broad match and it's performing well, there's no reason to have exact match or phrase match underneath it. Simplicity is typically the best way forward. I think I've seen Google's actually pushing a beta program where you can turn off all keyword match types on a campaign level, where there's only broad match keywords in the campaign. I mean, for right now, we still like phrase and exact match, but I think within a couple of years, there's not going to be match types. It's just add keywords, and that's where we're moving.
Yeah, and I think PPC Greg, who I saw in here in the chat, and I saw in a Hulu ad last night, had spotted that, where they said upgrade all your keywords to broad match, which again I think is disingenuous if you are not an advanced search marketer. I know everybody here is advanced, this SMX Advanced. But for many folks, if you just turn those on, I mean, that is going to be hugely detrimental, especially if you don't have actual smart bidding on. It's going to be a nightmare for people. So
Yeah.
I feel really bad for anybody that sees that upgrade and actually clicks on it. But yeah, I mean, again, the biggest thing I think for like exact match is if you really want to try to make sure you've got good impression share, that you're showing up, that you know that those terms are like your winning terms. Again, a lot of times we look at it like you got a JV team here in broad match can help you maybe find keywords that can be elevated up to a varsity team, put them in there in an exact match and, you know, let them work for you because you know that they're really valuable terms.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to catch your breath here. All right. So from Adam says, given how little search terms Google shares with us, does it concern you that over 50% of search terms are invisible?
It used to bother me more. I guess I've gotten used to it. Typically, there's enough data in there that you can kind of guide the campaigns in the right direction when you need to. But I think, again, if you're pushing towards target ROAS bidding, where it's bidding based on revenue, that becomes much less important, because if it doesn't drive revenue, the system won't target it in the future. So that's another big reason why I try to get all of our lead gen clients onto some kind of target ROAS bidding. But it definitely is difficult to do, especially with smaller advertisers. They might not even have a CRM, so it's not always an option. But it concerns me a little. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all want another rant, but I mean, it's concerning to me, and it's mainly because of the gaps of what it's under.
Yeah.
It's under personally identifiable information.
I think we should take a vote on whether or not we want
No, you don't want another one. But I mean, like, you look at this, and it's not only are we missing these terms that are exact match, phrase match, but the majority in many cases of terms are hidden, and these are terms that have conversions coming from them. And we're talking about exact match, and obviously broad match is a different ballgame.
Right.
If we're spending money on these terms, the answer should just be like, hey, let's take this entire report away, which I think will probably be gone in about 2 years. Or like, let's just say we don't want to show you everything. I don't understand why. A lot of times it's not even, it's like 70%. And I know, Melissa, you can talk to this too, about 70% of the conversions will even be hidden. It's like, this is not helpful. It's getting to the point where it's not helpful, and it's not plausible that it's actually being hidden for personally identifiable information, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely frustrating to have lack of data when you're trying to make like decisions of where to spend, significant budgets. Coming from a world when I started out, you could see the keywords from SEO traffic on Google Analytics. So it definitely is frustrating that we lose this, over time. But I think like the way I heard from someone at Google that really kind of made sense for me on smaller campaigns, if you think about it, where they're blocking 70% of search terms and ones that converted, I think the ones that converted are really the only ones that it makes sense to me to block from a privacy perspective. Because if somebody filled out your form, now you have their name, email, phone number, and you only had one conversion in that time frame, you can actually see what that person searched for. And a lot of times, like, you're basically tying a search to a specific user, and from a privacy perspective, that's what they claim they're trying to block.
Yeah, and then it gets into the point though of how loose is matching becoming, right? Because if we're doing exact match, I can see with broad match, phrase match, but when we're blocking everything, then it's like, there's something is awry, in my opinion.
But I
Okay.
agree with you. I think that report is gone within a couple of years, along with match types.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got another question here from Anna. What are your thoughts on a TROAS strategy for lead gen clients? I have one in particular where we upload offline conversions. Good job on you. Valid leads, and if they booked an appointment, we don't have actual closed sales data though. I'm leaning towards going to a TCPA strategy, but I'd like your thoughts on TROAS in this situation.
So if you're importing conversions without the real revenue, it's a little tricky. I prefer TROAS over to CPA because then again the system knows which leads converted and what the value was. If we don't have real-time revenue data, we try to put like ballpark estimates. If like your average conversion is worth $100, just assign $100 value to that conversion action. That's still better than just going after CPA, where the system again can't differentiate between a lead that will convert or won't. But again, if you are targeting towards a specific action, not the lead, but something further in the sales pipeline, a closed customer, then CPA can work as long as the system knows that those are not the same as leads. And just you can change on the campaign setting and use that as your primary conversion to run after for the campaign.
Yeah, and it's a really tough question because it's so business dependent, right? And we have a client that's a SaaS client where we target lawyers, and in their business profile, you get a lead that comes through. There's an ICP system that it goes through to qualify if it meets criteria to be considered marketing qualified, and then within 1 hour, a salesperson looks at it, looks up the person, and it will either turn it into an SQL or disqualify it, right? And so in that case, if it's qualified, I don't care about the ROAS. I'm just looking for the qualified lead.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's like target CPA. We
Can
move
work well
to target CPA, but we only do SQLs with the Salesforce integration with Google Ads. So in that case, it's like they have a human within every hour that is verifying the leads, and we only care about getting those SQLs for them at the right price. So in that case, I don't care about target ROAS. It's on them to do the rest of the job, right? So like everything's a little bit different, but I think both can work. It's really like business dependent in how much data you have. And then it's also like a quantity thing too, right? Like if you don't have a ton of volume and a ton of leads and closed deals like that might be tough on the TROAS side of things. So you might go towards something with a little more volume.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think also the other thing to keep in mind is just unique to the business is the purchase cycle, how long it takes to go from lead to the next stage in the funnel. As long as that data can come back pretty quickly, then your CPA can work well for that.
Okay, great. We've got another question from Elena here. What do I do if my TROAS is set much below my actual goal and it still isn't bringing in the ROAS I want using max conversion value? And I can rant on this again too. I think it is a terrible, terrible, terrible name change that Google made, calling everything max conversion value, and then you flip on
switch
with target return on ad spend. Those two things couldn't be more dissimilar, and they're named the same thing in there. So when you see that it's max conversion value with TROAS, just know there couldn't be more opposite with it. So again, it looks like you're using max conversion value with TROAS in this case. So Maham, what would you do if you're not hitting those goals and the ROAS is under where you'd like it to be and you're still not hitting it? What do you do?
So, I mean, sometimes the system just can't get the performance that you're aiming for, but I would definitely look at trying to, again, force the campaign to get more transaction volume by maybe switching back to max conversion value without the target ROAS, or even max conversions just for a short period of time so it has more conversion data. It starts testing traffic to new keywords, products, whatever type of campaign it is. And then once you find pockets of success, it can kind of hone in on that and you switch back to target ROAS. But I think to your point, Greg, it's very important to think about that mandate that you give the system with each one. Maximize conversion value has a very different mandate than maximize conversion value with target ROAS. The first, to max conversion value, we'll spend the whole budget and try to get you as much revenue as it can. Whereas when you add the target ROAS, it's only going to spend as much as it can when it thinks it can hit your ROAS. So it's definitely important to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and then another thing I would say is if you're not hitting those, it might also be like, what is your offer? What's your landing page look
Exactly.
like? What are you trying to feed in? Can you get a lighter conversion? Like what other options do you have?
Yeah.
And if it's sales, it's a little bit tougher. But like, again, how do you showcase your, key differentiators better, things like that. So,
Yeah.
in that case, it might not be the bidding side of things, but I also don't know like what, if it's broad match, phrase match, shopping.
Right.
anything like
But
So,
that's definitely a good point, because like for us on our lead gen clients, I think the biggest lever that we can push to in campaign performance is actually, launching a dedicated landing page, increasing the conversion rate. If you can, double, triple your conversion rate, that affects your campaign in a very large way. And I think that that's often underlooked.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So there's a bunch of people are saying, I hope there's no Google reps here. I hope there's not either. Okay. So there's a message from Jared saying avoid broad match in Bing. We didn't touch on that. Menahem, what are your thoughts there?
So Bing is interesting. I mean, they typically try to copy, the feature set from Google, but I have noticed that they are a little more liberal in their matching. Their algorithm isn't as tight as Google's. So definitely, take more care to it, but follow the same methodologies. If it works, it works, and it really helps you expand. I think broad match is also important for Bing because they have less search volume. So you're maxed out on phrase and exact a lot faster. And so you need to lean on broad to get more search volume, but definitely need to make sure you're watching the search terms and have the right bid strategies in place.
Yeah, and then me personally, I don't use a lot of broad match in Bing. If you look at like phrase match in Bing, it's basically Google's broad match.
Yeah.
It matches to everything under the sun and more. I just Bing broad matches.
It's definitely a lot more liberal for sure.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I got another good question here from Anu. How do we leverage smart bidding to its max potential in a restricted or strongly restricted category? For example, criminal defense lawyers or surgeons, because in that case, we cannot utilize custom intent and audience signals.
Yeah, I find that in highly competitive industries like that, we try to stick a little bit more to phrase and exact match keywords, and make sure to bring in like the sales pipeline data for smart bidding, so it knows what's a better quality lead. But yeah, you can't really rely on audiences for a lot of things like that: alcohol, drug, rehab, medical stuff, things of that nature. So you really have to lean on whatever is available for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think there's some other workarounds that you could try, right? Like if you try dynamic search ads and you
Right.
send them right to those specific URLs, Google is smart enough to know what that's about. And many times, you can see that actually picking up the data from that page, especially if you've got a lot of good content on there, and actually go and be able to advertise into those. And you're not the ones putting it in. All you're doing is putting a page in.
Right.
Or you could do a final URL on something like PMAX and just have, just only go to that one page, or
Right.
do a big list of exclusions across every other page you've got there and almost make a pseudo DSA with the PMAX campaign. But I think some of those two, you almost make the engines do the work that you can't do.
Right.
What do you think about that, Manan?
Yeah, there definitely are workarounds like that, and sometimes you just need to be creative and try things like that and see if it works.
Okay, great. Okay, so from Janice here, do you see more success testing broad match in non-brand versus brand?
Yeah, so again, back to brand, we typically don't use broad match at all unless it's a very unique brand name that it can't match with something else. But even in those cases, we find that Google starts showing competitors, and a lot of times, if it's a unique brand name, Google will match that to whatever that brand does and just start showing a lot of non-brand traffic. So typically, we really try to stay with with phrase and exact for brand, and then broad is for more generic, bringing new customers into the pipeline.
Yeah, and if you're using broad match trying to do a brand, like a branded account, you're not doing a branded account. It's just not. So you need, it's phrase or exact if you want to do competitor, like the conquesting, or a branded account. Okay, a question from Ryan here, and did I miss somebody that raised their hand too? Re-raise it again. I'm sorry if I missed that. From Ryan, with more automation in the account, conversion rate optimization has never been more important. Oh, I guess that's not a question. Play the spike in CPC costs. You have to care more about the NFE rather than the front side only lead gen. Okay, so that was just going on top of what we were talking about with some of the questions about not hitting that ROAS there. So thank you, Ryan. Okay, so Manam, I want to just kind of pick your brain here quick and say, if you've got a lead gen client, like what typically kind of campaign wise build out, what does your account look like? Like, how do you go about it? If I were to open one up right now, what would be in there as sort of like a standard?
Yeah, so we typically start out with phrase and exact only. A lot of our lead gen clients are location based, so we'll have one campaign for each location because they're typically assigned separate budgets and bids, bidding aggressively or less aggressively based on the business goals. But it's typically going to be just a search campaign with phrase exact. We try to get to smart bidding, target CPA or ROAS as quickly as we can. And then we'll layer on things like a brand campaign, dynamic search campaign for keyword testing. And then we'll start testing broad match keywords and kind of see how it works in there. As it grows, as it scales, you can layer on other things, whether it's Performance Max for lead gen, discovery, YouTube, all that stuff as well.
Okay, great. And then what percentage would you say of your clients just overall are implementing PMax in some fashion or another?
So definitely a lot more on the e-commerce side, again, because of that value-based bidding. It makes it a lot easier, especially the ones that were reliant on smart shopping. For lead gen, less so. It's very tricky to get right and really only works well if you could bid further in the funnel and not just on the leads.
Okay, and then just a quick touch point on shopping as well. How do you see if you've got a standard shopping campaign and you put a Performance Max campaign with a feed in it, and they have the same products? What typically have you seen happen?
So Performance Max will always take precedence. The shopping campaign will stop serving. The only way to have the two run side by side is to exclude product segments or specific products from Performance Max, and then it'll fall back into shopping. I think that's something a lot of people don't realize. Additionally, the other thing I would say is Performance Max also will cannibalize your search campaigns unless you have an exact match search term, and it's not regular exact match. I think you and I have gone on this on Twitter, but it's if somebody searches for a keyword that you have, somebody searches for a search term that you have as a keyword in your search campaign, then the search campaign will take precedence. But if they search for a keyword that you don't have in your search campaign, even if it's slightly different, it'll fall into Performance Max. So that's, hope I'm explaining it right, but that's definitely a tricky piece.
Yeah, it's technically called if a keyword identically matched. And I went on a deep dive trying to figure out what this meant, and I wrote an article. I just put in the comments there. So if you are eligible to serve and your keyword matches identically, I don't know, you got to read the article. I went.
It's complicated.
I did the best I could to give them the response. But I think another thing too is like Google always wants you to use Performance Max in the way that they say. So put everything in there and let it run on shopping. And I don't really listen to them, to be honest with you. Like for some of those shopping campaigns, like you just can't have standard shopping in Performance Max, like Menachem said. There's priority levels, low, medium, high, and then there's PMax that's just never going to let anything else show.
Right.
And so sometimes I'll wrap it like off hours. I've got a client that takes 30% of their calls via phone, of their e-com calls, revenue comes in via phone. So I'll have my standard shopping campaigns that I know they're working, they're rocking. And then on off hours, I'll wrap a PMax campaign that is going towards all web sales, in the off hours to still have that visibility, still get that smart bidding. And when you talk to Google, they say, I've never seen this before, but it works. So like you kind of just see what works for your client and test a bunch. But you definitely, if you're using PMax with a feed and you've got another shopping feed, you need to be real careful. Okay, question. Somebody raised their hand. Karen, could you unmute?
Yeah, thank you. I think you just re-encapsulated the question that I had, but I was just confirming what I heard. So if I want to run a shopping campaign and I also want to run PMAX, should I just not associate my merchant feed with PMAX, or should I just not run both of them at the same time?
So yeah, I guess it depends how you want to run Performance Max. If you don't associate your feed with Performance Max, it won't have any shopping placements. It will just run on search, display, video, and so on. You likely do want to have your products in there so it can show in shopping as well. It has more data, can optimize, be a lot more efficient. You just want to split the products, put maybe one category or a bestseller in this campaign and put the other products in that campaign.
Yeah.
To think about how to structure it.
Okay, super. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and then you can also, if you wanted to still use PMAX, if you've got like product categories, you can remove that feed and you can still have like lifestyle imagery of the products.
Right.
And you can still run PMAX. You just don't want to make sure you don't have that feed on there if your shopping ads are actually doing well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
You bet. All right, Garrett, question from Garrett.
Yes, let's say for like geo campaigns, if you're launching those geo PMAX and you're also considering like launching like call only, do you think PMAX will cannibalize like call only campaigns? And the last is, do you think that call only campaigns may even cannibalize your paid search campaigns if bidding on the same keywords? So that's like twofold.
So does PMAX, so the question is, we got some geo campaigns and we launched PMAX. Is it going to eat into call only? And then will call only eat into PMAX? Was that the last part of it?
Well, the last part is would call only eat into like your traditional paid search campaigns if you're bidding on the same exact keywords?
Okay, Menahem, you want to take it first?
Yeah, so I think as far as call only and standard search, it's really whichever campaign has a higher ad rank. So bid and quality score. PMAX though will always take precedence over everything as long as the keyword, like Greg mentioned, that link he dropped in the chat is not an identical match to what's in your search campaign. So if you have an exact match of what somebody searched in your search campaign, that will take precedence over PMAX. Pretty sure I'm getting that right, Greg. Correct me if I'm mistaken there.
That's correct. Yeah. So PMAX could eat into that and likely will into your call only campaigns unless you've got a huge plethora of keywords. And then the other issue is Google will just make things not eligible now. It'll be like not eligible to a search volume, and it's like, well, now you're not even identical anymore, which is a whole different.
I think the best way to explain is like if you have a broad match keyword in a search campaign, technically it can reach a very wide audience. But if you don't have the exact search term that somebody searched for as a keyword in a search campaign, it will go into Performance Max.
Yep, I believe that's correct. Okay, a question here, and we've only got a few minutes left. So we'll go to Jason here. And Jason says, I heard that if you're running a feed-only PMAX campaign that you need to have standard shopping campaign and in addition, or else the PMAX campaign may not serve on shopping as much. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think so. Again, PMAX will take precedence over everything and anything in your account pretty much. And you don't need to have standard shopping alongside Performance Max to run. If you want feed only, you basically just remove all other assets from the campaign, just provide the feed and it will be feed only. I think the important thing to remember with that is it's not shopping only. It's only ads made from your data feed. It will run ads across dynamic search, display, discover, YouTube, and so on, but it will be using the images, the product information from your data feed.
And do you have any problems making feed-only campaigns? Do you do that anymore?
We do it all the time. There are no problems with it. From what I understand, it's approved by Google. They just don't want to say it out loud. They don't recommend it officially, but the system is built to be able to do it. And I think Ginny has chimed in when other people have had mistakes, letting them know like it's possible and it should be there for the long term. Okay,
yeah, and sometimes I have issues, so I just clone campaigns in editor and then I just
reconfigure the product. I think most of the issues that I have is when you go to create a new asset group, it automatically populates the URL field. So when you try to save it, it sees a URL and it sees the other fields are empty and it throws an error. But if you clear out every field and the logo, it usually lets you save.
Okay, another quick question here. Does upgrading to enhanced conversions make an incremental difference in the AI performance?
So I think officially Google does not, sorry, you said enhanced conversions?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, all it is it's feeding the system more data. I think the published metric is about 10% more data gets collected with enhanced conversions. So more data allows the system to make more efficient decisions. Definitely try to implement it wherever we can.
Okay, perfect. We are just about out of time here. It's been a great conversation. Thank you, Menahem. Where can people find more out about you? You're one of the best people in the business, always here to help out. How do people get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, or on our website, jxtgroup.com. And I try to share our findings on Search Engine Land as well.
Okay, and if you like rants and raves, I do it every Friday. I've got a show, Marketing O'Clock, where
Highly recommend.
My face just turns red and I scream about Google Ads. So Marketing O'Clock, if you want more of me, and I'm at Greg Finn, happy to answer any other question we couldn't get to. And then coming up in the next few minutes is a keynote presentation with myself and Kaya Sainsbury-Carter, the Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Advertising. And Microsoft is going to talk about advertising and conversational AI. Thank you all so much for the fantastic questions. Hopefully we got you some answers today. And remember, you can access the next keynote here in the agenda, and you can re-listen to this once it's uploaded as well. So thank you all, and have a great day 2 here at SMX Advanced.
Thank you all. Thank you.